The paternity results arrived on my phone at 6:47 in the morning, the same hour my daughter was supposed to be walking down the aisle. I was sitting at my kitchen table in Guelph, the same table where I'd eaten breakfast for 31 years. The coffee was hot. I remember noticing that specifically that the coffee was still hot, because everything else in that moment felt like it was dissolving. I read the message 3 times. Then I set the phone face down on the table and just sat there, listening to the furnace tick. 3 weeks earlier, I had signed papers that my son-in-law's family's lawyer slid across a conference table on the 14th floor of an office building in downtown Toronto. The papers said I would receive $480,000 transferred in 2 installments into an account my own lawyer had set up. They said I would not discuss certain matters with certain people. They said I would not contact my son-in-law, I should say my former son-in-law, directly or indirectly for a period of no less than 5 years. I signed. I took the pen they handed me, a nice pen, heavier than it needed to be, and I signed every page they put in front of me. My wife had been gone for 9 years by then. Ovarian cancer caught too late. So it was just me in that conference room, across from 3 people I had never met, signing away my right to speak about what my daughter had done to her husband. I want to be honest about something. I did not sign because I was ashamed of her, though I was. I did not sign because the money changed my life in some meaningful way, though at 63, with a pension that wasn't what I'd planned on, it helped. I signed because my daughter sat across from me at this same kitchen table 2 months before that meeting and told me she needed me to. She held my hand and she cried and she said, "Dad, if you love me, please." And I am her father. That's all I've ever really been. I signed. Her name is Nora. She's 34. She's my only child, born 17 months after my wife and I moved from Halifax to Ontario in a hospital on a Tuesday in February during the kind of snow that makes you feel like the world has gone quiet. She came into this world screaming, which I always thought was funny because she grew up to be the quietest person in any room, reserved, watchful. She got that from her mother. She married Owen 8 years ago. He was 30 at the time, a structural engineer, the kind of quiet, competent man who fixes things before you know they're broken. He grew up in Oakville. His parents, his mother particularly, were the kind of people who had opinions about everything and kept most of them to themselves, which I respected. Owen and I used to watch hockey together on Saturday nights when they came for dinner. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. He was a good man. I want to be very clear about that. The trouble started, as far as I can piece it together, about 2.5 years before that morning in the conference room. Nora had been working at a commercial real estate firm in Mississauga. She'd been there 6 years and she was good at her job. Her manager was a man named, and I will use his name because he has earned it, Philip Drayton, 47, divorced. The kind of man who wears his watch on the wrong wrist and thinks that makes him interesting. I did not know about Philip until Nora told me herself on a Thursday evening in March when she came to my house and sat down at this table and told me she was pregnant, that the baby was not Owen's and that she was in love with someone else. I did not say anything for a long time. She talked. She explained. She used words like connection and clarity and the life I was supposed to be living. I watched her hands while she talked. She has a mother's hands, long fingers, a habit of pressing them flat on the table when she's nervous. I had not seen her this nervous since she was 17 and backed my car into the garage door. When she finished, I asked her one question. I said, "Does Owen know?" She said, "No, not yet." I said, "Then you need to go home and tell him tonight." She did. I don't know exactly what was said. Owen called me the next morning, and his voice was the voice of a man who had not slept and was not going to sleep for a long time. He didn't ask me anything. He just said, "I wanted you to hear it from me, not from anyone else." Then he said goodbye, and that was the last real conversation I had with him for months. What happened next I learned in pieces. Philip Drayton's family had money, serious money, the kind that comes from 3 generations of real estate in the GTA, the kind that hires lawyers before you even know you need one. When Nora told him she was pregnant, he proposed, and his mother, a woman I never met but feel I know entirely too well, decided the cleanest solution was to make Owen disappear from the equation. Quietly, quickly, permanently. Owen had loved Nora for 8 years. He had bought a house with her in Burlington. He had driven her to her mother's grave every year on the anniversary. He had been trying to have children with her for the last 2 years, had gone through every appointment, every test, every conversation with doctors about his own numbers, which were not good. He had low motility, very low. His doctor told him privately that natural conception was unlikely, though not impossible. They told him it was his. That's the part I keep coming back to. For 3 weeks they let him believe it. Nora let him believe it, and she sat in their house in Burlington while he processed what it meant that his wife was in love with another man, but was also, apparently, carrying his child. The hope that created in him, I can only imagine it, and the imagining makes me sick. Then Philip's mother got involved. She contacted Owen directly, which her lawyers probably advised against. She told him the truth, that the child was Philip's, that Nora was going to marry her son, and that the family was prepared to compensate Owen generously for his cooperation. That's the word she apparently used. Cooperation. Owen told me this much later, after everything. He said she used the word like it was a transaction for new windows. Owen did not cooperate immediately. He contacted a lawyer of his own. There were 2 weeks of back and forth that I was not part of and did not want to be part of. Nora came to see me twice during that period. Both times she looked like she hadn't eaten. I fed her and said very little. Eventually, Owen agreed to a settlement. I don't know the full number. I know it was significant. I know he signed an NDA that covered, among other things, any discussion of the pregnancy, the paternity, or the circumstances of the divorce. I know he left the house in Burlington. They sold it, split the proceeds according to the agreement, and moved into a condo in Hamilton. Then Nora's lawyer called my lawyer and explained that the family wanted me to sign something as well. As the bride's father, I was considered, and this is the legal language, a party with material knowledge. They wanted that knowledge contained. My own lawyer reviewed it. He said it was aggressive, but not unusual in cases involving significant assets. He said I should think carefully about whether I had any reason to refuse. I didn't refuse. The wedding was set for the last Saturday in October, at a vineyard near Niagara-on-the-Lake. Nora had been to this vineyard before, years earlier, with Owen for a friend's wedding. I wondered if she thought about that. I didn't ask. I was invited. Of course I was invited. I was the father of the bride. I had a suit that my wife had helped me pick out for an event we never ended up attending. She got sick before we could, and I had it dry cleaned and pressed. I shined my shoes. I was going to walk my daughter down the aisle and shake the hand of a man I did not trust, and smile in photographs and eat canapes and say nothing. That was the plan. I was at my table at 6:47 in the morning, and the phone buzzed with an email from a lab I didn't recognize. The subject line was, "Prenatal paternity. Report attached." I had not ordered a paternity test. I had not been involved in any paternity test. I stared at the subject line for a long moment, and then I opened it. The email was addressed to me by mistake. I understood that immediately. My email address, the one I've had since 2004, because I am not a person who changes things unnecessarily, is a first initial, last name, a number. Nora set up an email address for the test using what she thought was her own variation, and she made a 1-digit error. The report came to me instead of her. I read it once, then I read it again. The document was 4 pages long, dense with clinical language that I worked through slowly because I am a man who reads carefully. The conclusion was on the last page, written in a plain font, stated simply the way a doctor delivers news they have given many times before. Philip Drayton was not the father. There was a second section. They had apparently also tested a reference sample from Owen. How that happened I still don't fully understand. Whether Nora had somehow obtained it or whether there had been earlier testing I didn't know about. Owen was not the father either. I sat with that for a long time. The coffee cooled down, and I let it. I am 63 years old. I worked for 31 years as a land surveyor for a municipal government in Ontario. I am not a dramatic person. I do not make scenes. I have in my life learned to let a great many things be what they are without my interference. But I am also a father, and I was sitting in my kitchen holding information that was going to change the course of that day, possibly more than that day, and I had to decide what to do with it. I called my daughter at 7:15. She didn't answer. I called again at 7:30. She answered on the fourth ring, and her voice was already the bright, managed voice of a woman who had slept badly and applied makeup and decided she was going to be fine. She said, "Dad, I'm getting ready." "What is it?" I said. "You need to come here before you go anywhere. There's something I need to show you." She said, "Dad, the ceremony is at 2. I have hair and—" I said, "Nora, please." There was a silence that I recognized. It's the silence she's had since she was small, when she realizes she has run out of room to maneuver. She arrived at my house at 8:40. She was in a housecoat, her hair half done, a travel mug in her hand. She looked at my face when she came in the door, and I watched her go still. I showed her the email on my phone. I didn't say anything while she read it. I poured her coffee. She didn't drink. She sat down. She didn't cry immediately. That surprised me. She sat very straight and looked at the table, and she did the thing her mother used to do when she was working through something terrible. She pressed both palms flat on the surface and breathed. In, out. Then she said very quietly, "I don't understand." I said, "Who else were you with, Nora?" She didn't answer for a long time. Then she told me. It wasn't a long explanation. There had been someone else briefly, before things with Philip became what they became. A man she'd met at a conference in Calgary in January. She hadn't thought it possible. She'd had what her doctor had described as a hostile uterine environment, her own fertility issues, which had made conception unlikely, which was part of why she and Owen had struggled. She had not used protection because she hadn't imagined she needed to. She hadn't even told Philip this part. She had assumed the baby was Philip's. She had been wrong. I said, "What was his name?" She told me. "A man from Calgary. She had his phone number somewhere." She hadn't spoken to him since February. I said, "You have to call Philip." She said, "Dad," I said, "before noon. You have to call him before noon." She sat there for another 20 minutes. I made more coffee. I did not tell her what to do beyond that one thing, because she was 34 years old and the rest of it was hers to carry. Eventually, she picked up her phone. I went and stood at the kitchen window while she made the call. The backyard was still in that way October mornings are in Ontario, the leaves mostly gone, the grass pale, everything waiting. I could hear her voice but not the words. I heard it change. I heard what it sounds like when a person's life reorganizes itself. When she put the phone down, she said, "He wants his mother to be there when we talk, in person. He wants it in person." I said, "Okay." She said, "The guests," I said, "one thing at a time." I drove her to the hotel where Philip and his mother were staying near the vineyard. I waited in the lobby. It is a particular kind of waiting, sitting in a hotel lobby on a Saturday morning, while your daughter is upstairs dismantling her own wedding. I drank the worst coffee I'd had in years, hotel lobby coffee from a self-serve urn. And I watched other guests in their weekend clothes moving in and out and wondered what they thought I was doing there. An old man in a pressed suit in a lobby at 10 in the morning. She was up there for 2 hours. When she came down, she was wearing the housecoat still. She had been crying, really crying, not the managed kind, and she looked smaller than she had at 8:40. She sat down next to me, and I put my arm around her, and she leaned into me the way she used to when she was 7. She said, "It's off. The wedding's off." I said, "Yes." She said, "He wasn't as angry as I expected. His mother was angry as I expected. His mother was angry enough for both of them." I said that sounded about right. She said, "He asked me why I didn't just postpone it when I first found out there were questions. I didn't have a good answer." I said, "Did you tell him about the man from Calgary?" She said, "Yes." She said Philip had sat very still when she told him, and then he had said he needed her to leave. We sat in the lobby for a while longer. I didn't push her to move. Eventually she said she needed to call Owen. I said I thought that was the right thing. She said it was going to be the hardest phone call she had ever made. I said probably yes. She made it outside, standing by the hotel's front door in her housecoat while taxis pulled in and out, and I watched through the glass. The call was short. Whatever Owen said, she nodded, and then nodded again, and when she came back and her eyes were wet. She said he wasn't surprised. He said he always thought there was something that didn't add up. I said, Owen was always a careful person. She said he didn't hate me. He said he was just tired. That's when she cried properly, right there in the hotel lobby. I held her and let her, and I thought about her mother, and I thought about the conference table and the heavy pen and the papers I'd signed, and I thought about Owen watching hockey on a Saturday night and not needing to say much. The guests were notified by early afternoon. The vineyard was informed. Philip's mother handled it in the way such women handle things, efficiently, coldly, with a statement drafted by a lawyer that said the event had been postponed due to unforeseen circumstances. Most people understood there would be no rescheduling. The man from Calgary was reached eventually. He was cooperative in the way that most people become cooperative when they are told something that large and unexpected. He came to Toronto 6 weeks later, and there were appointments, and then there were legal arrangements, and the whole apparatus of something none of us had planned for began to assemble itself. Nora spent October and November at my house. She slept in her old room, which still has the same curtains from when she was 16, because I never saw the point of replacing things that aren't broken. We ate dinner together most nights. I taught her to make her mother's chicken and rice, which I'd been making wrong for years, and only recently figured out. She is not back with Philip. That's over. She is not back with Owen. That is also over. And I think Owen deserves for it to stay over. He is building something for himself in Hamilton, and from what I hear, he is doing it quietly and carefully, the way he always did everything. The paternity agreement, the NDA, the documents I signed. My lawyer is reviewing what changed when the terms of the original situation changed. It is a process. These things are slow. Some days I sit at this table with my coffee and I think about how strange it is, the machinery of a life. How you sign a document and think you are containing something, and the thing you are trying to contain turns out to have been already different than you thought. How a one-digit error in an email address reorganizes a Saturday morning. I do not know yet what the shape of this will be. I know that my daughter is going to have a child in the spring, a girl, they think, and that I am going to be a grandfather, and that the circumstances of that child's arrival are not what anyone planned. I know that I will be at this table most mornings with my coffee. I know that if she calls, I will answer. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the money, not the lawyers, not the October morning in the hotel lobby, just the fact that she called me. That when it all came apart, she was at my door at 8:40 in a housecoat, and I was here. I don't know what else a father is supposed to be. I keep thinking about the pen, the one the lawyer handed me across the conference table, heavier than it needed to be, the kind of pen someone buys to signal that serious things happen here. I held it, I signed my name, and I told myself I was doing it for Nora. That part was true, but I also told myself that signing meant it was over, that the documents would contain the mess the way a lid contains something you'd rather not smell. That part was wrong. Things have a way of finding the path they were always going to take. You can draft an NDA, you can wire money, you can book a vineyard and order flowers and line up a string quartet, and none of it changes what is actually true. The report came to my inbox because Nora mistyped a single digit in an email address, one number, and that one number undid 6 months of legal maneuvering and a great deal of somebody's money. I don't think that's poetic justice. I think it's just how reality works. You can manage appearances for a while, but the facts sit there quietly, and eventually they surface. What I've been sitting with in the months since is the question of what I should have done differently. Not on the wedding morning. I think I handled that the only way I could. But before. When Nora came to this table and held my hands and asked me to sign, I said yes because I loved her. That was real. But love without honesty is just protection that eventually fails. I protected her from a difficult conversation, and what she got instead was a harder one, in a hotel lobby, in a housecoat, on what was supposed to be the best day of her life. Owen knew something didn't add up. He told her that on the phone with a steadiness that I think took real courage. He had been handed a version of events that was incomplete, and instead of accepting it because accepting it was easier, he held on to the question. That kind of clarity, the willingness to sit with discomfort rather than reach for the nearest comfortable explanation, is something I have tried to practice in my own life and do not always manage. Owen managed it. He paid a price for it, and then he walked away with his integrity, which I think is the better end of that trade. Nora is going to be a mother in the spring. She is living carefully now, in a way I haven't seen from her before, thinking before she speaks, sitting with difficult things rather than moving quickly past them. I don't want to romanticize what happened. It was painful, and some of the damage won't fully repair, but I watch her building something more honest than what she had before, and I think that counts for something. I'm 63. I've made my share of choices I'd take back. What I've learned, slowly, imperfectly, is that the most important things are pretty simple to describe and hard to do. Be honest, especially when it costs you something. Think clearly, especially when your feelings are loud. And when the ground shifts under you, find your footing and keep going. Nora was at my door at 8:40 in the morning with her hair half done and her whole life coming apart, and she came to me. I was here. That's the part I'll hold on to. Not the pen, not the papers, not the number in the account. Just that she knew where to come and the door was open. That's enough. It has to be.